Before we start digging into Audition, I want to cover the basics of sound design one more time for you guys. The most important sound element is dialogue, and when we bring it into Audition, we want to divide the tracks by the talent. We want to divide the tracks by mics, like if they were using a shotgun and a wireless microphone, and we want to divide the tracks by location because the ambiences could be quite different. The common tools that we're going to use for our dialogue is a parametric equalizer to clean up the highs and the lows. We want to match the volume. Typically want our dialogue to be center mono and have it coming straight from the screen, unless we want to do a gag where there's somebody just off frame left that calls our hero and they look screen left. If we're dealing with multiple dialogue tracks, we also want to connect them to a Vox bus track so that it's easy to keep them separate from the rest of the elements. And this is typically where we might want to add some compression, and we'll talk about compression in a minute. When we talk about sounds, we talk about diegetic sounds and non-diegetic sounds. Diegetic sound is something like ambience. It comes from the space. It's within the world of the story. Room tone, a park exterior, a submarine interior would be examples. And typically, we would cross-dissolve these ambient sounds as we move from one space to another, unless we want to have a really severe difference, like we start in a training room and then a punch brings us into a boxing ring full with a giant crowd. Kind of sudden shock would be the sort of thing that would motivate a straight cut, but typically we want to use cross dissolves for ambience. Other diegetic sound effects are things like footsteps, a door closing. Basically, whatever we see in the frame, we need to hear it. And it's the old adage, see it, say it. And we're going to use this adage in several different ways in terms of editing strategy as well as sound design. Diegetic sound effects are really important because our eyes connect our ears to the visuals, and that's a frontal lobe experience, and it's our logic responding, and it's the way that the audience will connect to this world. If we see somebody running and we don't hear those footsteps, we're just not connecting in there. We're not leaning in towards the story. Non-diegetic sound effects come from outside the story. They could be low drones. Their purpose is to create a mood and emotions, and it uses the ears only, and so we're able to bypass the frontal lobe and appeal to the audience emotionally. In a certain sense, non-diegetic sound effects serves the same purpose as music. It lets us know how we're supposed to feel in the scene. Scared, in love, happy. Examples of non-diegetic sound effects are low-pitched drones that disturb us, high-pitched metal bends that catch us off guard. Whooshes could be either diegetic or non-diegetic, a sword fight or a punch. We might hear a whoosh and it makes it feel more solid. But if it's just like turning your head and we hear a whoosh, that's sort of more of a non-diegetic sound, but still gets our attention. Music could be diegetic or non-diegetic. It could be an orchestral score, it could be sound coming from a radio in the kitchen, or it could transition as one and become the other, which is really cool. Your best practice for sound design is to mute the music before you complete the other sound design. This will give you a chance to get all those little things in there that you need to hear, and then you can bring up the music at the end for the final mix. On your master channel, we want to put on a mastering filter that will help bring up the loudness. We can put on a hard limiter to make sure that we don't have to worry about peaking. Sometimes the hard limiter works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the quality of the dialogue that we record. What is compression? Compression basically creates loudness. It eliminates the peaks and valleys inside a file. So here on the left is an uncompressed file where the frequencies are allowed to be quiet and soft, and after compression they're all basically raised up to a similar level, and it sounds much louder. Sometimes if you're watching commercials, you'll notice how much louder they are than the program you're watching. That's kind of like an old school Gen X kind of experience that you guys might not have anymore. Mixing strategy should be combining high, mid, and low frequency sound effects in your project. You can create space by stereo panning your effects left and right at different degrees, and you can also adjust the volume of your tracks. So try to keep all of that in mind as we go forward into using Audition.